As a trauma survivor, I have always been interested in resilience. But growing up, I believed it was something that you were born with. Then in graduate school, I learned that it was a quality that we all possess and a set of skills we can all strengthen. Most of my resilience has come from writing and seeing myself in new ways by confronting the stories I've always told myself. The more I did that, the stronger I became, and I've dedicated my life to helping others do this work. This podcast is for anyone who wants to understand their story and how to revise it, because when we do that work, we change the world. Have you ever felt held hostage by something, be it a situation, a task, or something happening in the wider world? At the time, could you pinpoint the actual problem? In 2011, Somali pirates held Jessica Buchanan captive for 93 days. The situation was grim, but as she completed a powerful exercise during her imprisonment, Jessica realized the problems she faced were far deeper and ultimately more common than the kidnapping she endured. Join me, an author, TEDx speaker, book coach, and founder of Soul Speak Press, Jessica Buchanan, as we discuss the ways we dismiss our inner knowing, how to reclaim your voice, and how to write your truth as you discover the mountaintops and the emotional deserts we face on this week's episode of the Writing Your Resilience podcast. Let's dive in. Well, hello, Jessica. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited about today's conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I am equally as excited.
Well, when I got the pitch, the first thing that I thought of was when you were rescued. And some people may not know what that is, but I remember when that ordeal happened because it happened in 2012, at least the part that we were made, privy to in the beginning. And that was a profound year for me as well. So we're going to talk about some of those things, but I always like to start by giving you a chance to let people know what would you like them to know about you, about the books you've written, because you've written multiple books, and the work that you're currently doing.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I could use a lot of words to describe myself. I'm a wife and I'm a mom and a writer, a publisher, but I guess most notably, I am a kidnapping survivor. And so I'm a teacher by profession. And I ended up getting a teaching job, which is what my heart craved and wanted in East Africa right out of college. And met this cute Swedish guy at a trashy nightclub one night about 18 years ago, who a year and a half after we met became my husband. And he was working in Somalia. He's like the equivalent of a human rights lawyer. And his organization moved him to be based up in northern Somalia right when we got married. And so I quit my teaching job in Nairobi, Kenya, where we had met, and moved up to Hargeisa, Somaliland to be with him because we didn't want to have a long distance marriage. And, teachers can kind of always find work. We always land on our feet. There's always somebody who's interested in learning English or, their kids running around who want to play bingo or memory. So I wasn't too worried about keeping myself busy. And so that morphed into working for the UN and working for the Ministry of Education, creating curriculum, because curriculum development is actually my specialty. And I landed a job working for a Danish organization in mine action and firearm safety education, which was like not my area of expertise, but you can learn technical information easily and apply that. And so that's what I was doing in 2011. I'd been called to go down to southern Somalia to conduct a training for our staff. And it was great until it wasn't. And 3 days into our training, my colleague and our vehicle was taken over while we were headed to the guest house. And we were held up at gunpoint and then subsequently taken out into the desert where we were forced to participate in what I describe as a mock execution, and then held for 93 days in the desert until January 25th, 2012. By order of President Obama, we were rescued successfully by SEAL Team 6. So that is the very brief summary of that. Very defining 93 days of my life, and not where my writing journey began. I've always written. I started writing in the 5th grade on my mom's typewriter. I'm like an old soul, I think, because I would get up Every Saturday morning, I'd make up myself a pot of tea, like a pot of black
Mm.
tea. I don't know what fifth grader does that, and sit down at my typewriter at my desk and write my little novels. But my published journey started about 6 months after the rescue, when I woke up one morning and said to my husband, I think I'm ready to talk about this. Maybe I should start writing things down because I know I'm going to start forgetting. And that led us on a very traditional publishing journey, which I had a great experience. I know not everybody does, but I did. And then I've been writing for about 12 years. And that has led me to working with women in my own publishing company. I have a non-traditional publishing company where I only support women who've been through something. Now they know something
Mhm.
and they want to teach us something. We have published several anthologies and memoir manifestos is what we like to call them. And we just keep growing and keep publishing and keep working with these incredible women who've overcome. And it's definitely feels like my life's calling, and it's been a hard road and a long journey to get here, but now that I'm here, it feels pretty special.
Yeah, I love that you've taken something that was so awful in your own life and you've turned it around in such a beautiful way. And you've created these anthologies, which doesn't just give you a chance to share a little more of your story or to look at things from a different angle, but you're allowing other people to find their voices, to hone their voices, and to share their knowledge and wisdom with all of us. But I want to back up for a second and ask you about the publishing journey you had with your memoir, Impossible
Hmm.
Odds. You said that about 6 months in, you felt ready to write.
Hmm.
And, I know for a lot of people, when they've gone through something really difficult, and, a lot of times there are no words
Yeah.
for what we've experienced. It's a lived experience in our bodies.
Hmm.
What was that like for you in your first draft or two to write all that down? And how did that help to reframe, or how did it change the way you understood your experience?
Well, I want to give kind of a context to around Impossible Odds. I was pregnant. I got pregnant
Mm.
very quickly after the rescue. I found out about a month after the rescue that I was pregnant. So I was like thrown into the throes of expectant motherhood, and that definitely threw me for a loop. And I woke up that, like I was about probably 5 months pregnant. I had finally stopped throwing up, and I had the bandwidth to think like, "Oh, okay, I'm going to bring this new life into the world, and what has happened, and this baby is coming in on the heels of this life-changing situation. I need to write all of this down for him so that before I forget."
Yeah.
And so because of the nature of my story, and it was a very high profile media event because of its connection to SEAL Team 6, there was a lot of media attention around the story. And so I didn't know what I was doing because I'd never published before. I found a literary agent who was happy to take me on, and she was very well versed in this whole process, but we only had about 3 months to write the manuscript. And
Ooh.
I was having a baby in the middle of it. I'm still really struggling with PTSD. There was no way I was going to be able to write the manuscript by myself. So we brought in a ghostwriter who wrote, and my husband, he's Swedish, so English isn't his first language. We knew we wanted to write from both of our perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't feel capable of writing his piece. So the ghostwriter really helped and supported him, and then wrote the third like section that's more military focused. But I did write my parts of the book, and I think, yes, there were no words. Trying to, like, in the aftermath, trying to walk my family through the experience day by day. Like, I think we quit at day 5 because none of us could handle any more of the details and the
Yeah.
information because it was just too traumatizing. But it's like that quote, I write to know what I think. I write so that I know how I feel. I
Yes.
write so that I know what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, writing is the only way to break myself out of the numbness.
Mhm.
And I think it cracked me open and it got me ready to bring another life into the world, as ready as I could be. And I think it also tethered me to the experience in a way that was also of my choosing.
Mhm.
And so I found the process to be very empowering because it was the first time I had gotten to really speak what was true for me. First layer. Now there
Mhm.
have been like sub layers of truth and themes that I've mined out over the decade, 12 years since this all happened, which is, I think, pretty normal for
Mhm.
trauma survivors who are writing. But it helped me at least dig through that first part, that first layer. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Absolutely. And what I'm hearing, which is very common, is that there is an aspect of reliving when
Hmm.
we are writing about something that is traumatic. I mean, we're always reliving regardless of the content, but when you're beginning to relive those traumatic events, we feel them very deeply in our bodies. And what I love that happened for you is that you were very held. You had a ghostwriter that was
Hmm.
there helping to shape things. You had an agent who was
Yeah.
also helping to shape things. And obviously, you were writing your own pieces,
Hmm.
but you had people around you to help you make sense of your experience at the level that you could at that
Right.
stage. Because obviously, the story that you told in that memoir is the story of someone who just escaped something,
Yeah.
not the story of someone who has healed because you
Yes.
hadn't gone on that journey yet.
Mm-mm. Exactly. And I can't write about something I haven't experienced. I always say Impossible Odds is the account, right? Like
Mhm.
it's considered memoir, but it's the account of what happened. And the anthologies, Deserts to Mountaintops, those are themed, right? But those to me are essays that reflect my healing journey.
Mhm.
And there are so many different facets to healing, and there are
Yes.
so many different things that one could write about that. I just think that I'll probably people give me so much backlash, especially on social media, about like, can't you write about anything else or can't you talk about anything else? And I'm like, sure, but you don't understand this. It changed me at my core, and there are
Mhm.
so many facets of who I am now that I view through that lens that I
Yes.
want to explore and
Mhm.
write about. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and what I would say is that 12 years is not that long when you've gone
Mm,
through something that is high trauma. I
mm,
mean, it takes a long time to unpack these things. And what I
mhm,
see you unpacking on Instagram is your resilience,
mm.
not necessarily the trauma narrative.
Yeah.
And is that how you see it? Or what work do you hope to accomplish in addition to just mining at a deeper level?
I think I have several goals when I'm speaking on Instagram. I mean, my audience is always going to be women. I'm
Mhm.
always trying to reach women who have felt shamed into silence.
Yes.
That is the audience that I serve or I strive to, because it took me several years to realize that the kidnapping was a result of me abandoning myself, of
Hmm.
me deferring my own safety and security to someone who didn't have my best interests at heart, and somebody who bullied me, my colleague, and realizing that so many of the things that led me to that moment are very universal.
Hmm.
And so while my circumstances are kind of strange, everything I've learned about myself and my own resilience is very universal.
Hmm.
And so I strive to remind those women that, you know what, you have every right to share your story if you feel compelled to
Yes.
do so. You have every right to speak not just your truth, but the truth. So that is my goal, is to empower women to speak up and to share their story. It's not for everyone. Not everybody feels like that's part of their healing journey, but for
Hmm.
the ones that it is, I want to show them that there's freedom on the other side of that. Because I feel like once I started talking more openly about the self abandonment and about the fact that I felt bullied by my colleagues at work and my disordered eating and all of the other things that I've written about and that I talk about on social media, it has been very empowering for me and has been resilience building. And I think that I'm not the only one that it works that way for.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know a number of people who I would consider influencers, not in
Mhm.
the sense of like, I have a brand, or a
Mhm.
product that I want to share with you. I think of my client, Tia Levings. She is someone very much who was shaped by her experience within the Christian patriarchy. And she
Mm,
talks about it all the time.
mm.
And in sharing her experience, it doesn't just empower her by giving her a platform to be able to talk about this, but it's about the number of people who contact her and say, me too.
Yeah,
This happened to me too. And
absolutely.
I was moved by one of the essays that you put in your anthology about how one of the issues that happened, one of the, I would say, things you probably know in retrospect about how did this kidnapping happen? How did I get in
Mhm.
this situation? Is how much you discounted your own internal voice and
Mhm.
intuition around something is not right here.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that is, it still gives me chills to think about that morning. Like that is the moment that is the moment, the probably the most important moment of my life because I walked away from my truth. I walked away from a premonition. I mean, I had nightmares all night
Yeah.
long. Like they were almost verbatim what played out in the next 6 hours. And I
Mm-hmm.
am not a prolific dreamer or psychic abilities or anything like that. My intuition was just screaming at me, trying to keep me safe. And I abandoned her because
Yeah.
I was afraid of inconveniencing. I was afraid of what people would think. I was afraid I would lose my job. I was afraid of
Mm-hmm.
this, that, and the other. And I grew up in the church. I grew up a good girl. I grew up in the Midwest. Like, these are all behaviors and practices that were praised and modeled for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say it's the most important moment of my life, not just because it led me down this road that changed the trajectory of my life, but it also was so clarifying. It was the
Yeah.
moment where I can go back to and say, oh, okay, that pattern, it's time to put that to rest.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We're not going to repeat that lesson anymore, because we've learned it in a big, big way.
Yeah.
And so that to me above all else is the purpose and why I talk about it so much.
And I think that's a really important thing to do is to be able to talk about these things. And what touched me is, I told you before I hit the record button, you and I were both 2012. We
Mhm.
experienced that existential crisis, that
Mm.
big, terrible thing that
Mm.
impacted us. And in my case, mine is far less dramatic, but was more,
Mm.
longstanding is I was bitten by a tick and I got Lyme disease.
Mm.
And what's interesting is that I have that fulcrum moment as
Mhm.
well. I went to the doctor. I was having this burning pain underneath my arms, which was really weird, like in my
Yeah.
lymph nodes. I'd never had this before. I knew
Mm.
I'd been bit by a tick. I'd had some other wonky symptoms. And I went to this doctor and said, I think I have Lyme disease.
Mhm.
I'm not super sick, but I don't feel right either. And I'm having these weird symptoms. And I knew something was wrong with my body. I knew. And I had
Yeah.
known that something was wrong leading up to this as well. And I'd been dismissed by all of these
Yep.
doctors. And this doctor looked at me and said, you're not sick enough to have Lyme disease. And I could prescribe you some antibiotics and I will
Mhm.
hand you a piece of paper with a prescription on it, but you don't have Lyme disease and you don't need to take these. What you need to do is come back in 6 weeks and get tested. And then that will prove to you that you don't have Lyme disease. And internally, I felt this burning in my gut. Like,
Mhm.
I don't think this is right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't like antibiotics. I try not to
Mhm.
take them. I also wanted to be a good patient because I've
Sure.
already been told I was a problem patient.
Right? Yep.
And,
Mhm.
he was the authority.
Mhm.
And so I did what he asked me to
Mhm.
do. And it was the absolute worst thing that I could have done. I abandoned my
Yep.
inner knowing. And then I got to go on this wild ride, which lasted for years, where
Yeah.
I was extremely sick. And I got to
Mm.
a place where I thought I was going to die. I'm
Mm.
grateful beyond grateful that I am not just alive, but that I
Mm.
thrive.
Yeah.
And it gave me a chance to confront some of the traumas that
Mm.
were impacting my immune
Mhm.
system, all of that stuff. It was like the worst possible blessing. And
Yes.
so I'm grateful for it. And
Yes.
yet I would not ask for it again. I would not
Yes.
wish it on anyone else. And so I think that the way we tell our stories about not abandoning ourselves, even though our
Mhm.
experiences are different, there was that
Yes.
universal theme that spoke to
Yes.
me and I would imagine speaks to others.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I feel for you on so many levels with that. I actually have two authors that I worked with in the second anthology, both with Lyme's
Yes.
diagnosis. And their journeys are just like, I got a message from one of them the other day, and she's like, I've had 20 good days straight, which is
Mhm.
amazing. But it's been
Yeah.
years,
Mhm.
of not being believed, right?
Yeah.
So I feel that, all of that. I had a 2-book contract with my publisher, and I went back to them several years later and said I'm ready to write a second book. And it was about like reclaiming my voice. It was
Mhm.
about this, like, understanding that I had abandoned myself, and they were like, "Yeah, no, we're not interested. We released you from your contract." And I was really happy, actually, because
Mhm.
I had already figured out that I wanted to start Soul Speak Press, and so I was elated, actually, to be liberated from that. But was halfway through the manuscript and decided, like, the world doesn't need another memoir from Jess Buchanan.
Mm.
There are so many women. I hear stories every day. I get DMs every day from women who have reclaimed themselves in some way. They've
Mm.
escaped violent marriages, domestic abuse. They've served in the military and, escaped impending death. I mean, just
Mhm.
bonkers stories. And the through line for all of us is this conditioning, this cultural
Yes.
conditioning, the patriarchy, right? And
Yeah.
of abandoning ourselves for the sake of authority, for the sake of, I just thought everybody was smarter than me.
Mm.
Everybody knew better than me. And it turns out everybody was lying to me and
Yeah.
withholding pertinent information that I needed to make a decision
Mhm.
about my own safety and security. And again, not everybody goes to Somalia and experiences being held hostage by pirates, but we all know what it feels like to be held hostage by something,
Yeah.
and to be held hostage in silence. And so that's why that first anthology about our collective journey to reclaiming our voice, I just put the call out. I mean, I didn't have a very big audience or network at the time, but I said, hey, I've got a vision for this. I'll work with you. I'll help you find the theme in your story. And it was just like women came in droves, like, yes, 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 me too, me too, me too, me too. I want to finally share my story. And it was the most healing practice project I think I've ever, even until the end of all my time here on earth and all the writing I hope
Mhm.
that I get to do, that first that collective journey of reclaiming our voice and practice of
Mhm.
writing together was transformational.
Yeah, and I want to get into that a little bit more, but I'm going to backtrack because you work as a book coach. And one of the
Yes.
things you do is you help people claim their voices.
Mhm.
And back when you were in Somalia
Mhm.
and you were in captivity, you did something that helped you find your voice, that helped you begin to do the work. So you would go through every single event that happened in your life and you would think through it in a
Mhm.
way that allowed you to reconcile it. And I want you to talk about this because I work with so many women especially who have gone through really tough things.
Yeah.
And they want to reconcile things, they don't know how, and I
Mhm.
share lots of different ways, and I have a feeling there's going to be some similarities between what you
Mm.
did and what I teach, but
Yep.
I think it's important for people to hear again and again, this is how I did it, so that it can serve as a model for something they could do. Could you take us through just one life event, how you thought about it and how that helped you reframe and reclaim a piece of who you are so that you could go on to do this work?
Yeah. I love that question. Thank you. I would say it all stemmed really from, for a couple of reasons. One, I was trying just not to lose my mind.
Yeah.
I needed to find something to do, right? And secondly, I kind of laugh in sarcasm or irony. I'm the kind of person that doesn't like to waste time, right? Like I'm not going to take
Mhm.
an opportunity for granted. So I looked at this all this time I had just like yawning out before me. I had no
Yeah.
idea how much time I had. But I also I had some work to do. I had some
Mhm.
emotional work that I was grappling with when all of this happened. I had lost my mom the year before, just a little over a year before, and we lost her very suddenly and very tragically. And so I was still processing. We were all very much like in the throes of grief. I mentioned I grew up very religious, and I that rocked my faith and my spiritual life to its
Mhm.
core, losing my mom the way that we did. And I was like taking a spiritual sabbatical. I think that was the last thing I said to my dad. The last conversation I had with him before this all happened was like, God and I are on a break. Like
Mhm.
I don't feel like having any conversations with him. I'm 40 days in, thinking I'm probably going to be here for the foreseeable future. My mom and I had a very fraught relationship. I think, it was complicated, mothers and daughters. And I thought, no time like the present. Why don't I explore this?
Mhm.
She had had a horrible childhood. She dealt with mental illness that greatly impacted me and my childhood. And so I decided to just go back and like remember it all. And I went like from my very first memory and I walked through every day that I could remember. I can't claim that I remembered every single day of my life, but everything that I could remember and all the weird things that I'd never really like thought through or taken time to examine, especially around my relationship with my mom and her mental illness. And I walked through those really difficult memories and those experiences that had impacted and traumatized me as a child.
Mhm.
And it led me to a resolution. And I wish that I'd had a pen and paper to have written through this whole experience, but I didn't. But it led me to a place of forgiveness to her and to me, and also some sort of like spiritual forgiveness between each other. Even though she wasn't there, I could feel very much that her spirit and her presence was there. And I had conversations with her that I'd never had when she was living. And I never would have had the time or the opportunity, I think, to do that, to bury those grudges. Like I got real into it, I was
Mhm.
like, it was like Castaway, how he starts talking to the volleyball. Like
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what it looked like, but I was having this very physical experience in a very emotional and spiritual space. But I
Mhm.
remember picking up a stick and digging in the ground next to my mat and like mimicking, like burying my grudges and laying
Mhm.
them to rest there and then moving and walking away. And
Mhm.
so I think that practice, I would never have had the opportunity or taken the time to do that. And a lot of it revolved around people I needed to forgive.
Mhm.
Um, and that was very freeing
Yeah.
to process in that way, completely on my own, pretty much in solitude when I wasn't being terrorized. There were long spans of just silence and solitude. And so I think that another version of myself came out on the other side of that. And to me, that's healing.
Absolutely. And so, three things I'm curious about are that I teach when I teach forgiveness, that I think can
Mhm,
be really important to the work that we do as book coaches, as people
mhm,
who are helping people with their stories are number one, bearing witness to your own experience
mm,
and really allowing yourself to feel
yeah,
whatever it is you need to feel, whether that is deep sorrow or incredible rage.
mhm,
And then also being able to see through someone else's eyes
yeah,
can be really helpful. And then you have this beautiful practice of a physical way
yeah,
of putting it to rest.
yeah,
And we often discount these things like,
mhm,
writing is one way to do it,
yep,
but sometimes we need a ceremony,
Yes.
something physical, something tangible that we
Mhm.
do that moves us forward.
Yes. Yes. I am a big ceremony person. I every October will hold a grieving ceremony. Sometimes I do
Mhm.
it with friends, sometimes I just do it by myself. Every morning begins with a ceremony, and that
Yeah.
has I think that's transformational. Not in just your healing, but also just like brass tacks of your writing. Like
Mhm.
just, like signaling, okay, it's time to start, and
Yeah.
then end with a ritual or a ceremony. But yeah, it's symbolic, but it also is just so it makes everything feel so much more tangible.
Mm.
And I think, we talk about healing in the abstract so much. And for me, it made it something I could touch, taste, feel. And it was like closure,
Mhm.
right? It was like my closing ceremony. So I love that you use that word because that really resonates with me.
Yeah, I've had many ceremonies in my life
Mm,
to move past some of the things that I've gone through. And
yes.
so when you're working with your coaching clients or
Mhm.
you are putting out those calls for your anthologies, how does that work that you did translate to the work that you do with these
Mm.
women who have had powerful experiences and they now know something from them?
I am a terrific space holder. I think that the number one thing I bring to the table when I'm working with a client is that they're safe with me.
Mhm.
Their reactions, their emotions, their really crappy first drafts, it's all safe with me.
Mhm.
And I'm a teacher first and foremost. And so I'm always striving for all of us to learn, whether it's about ourselves or about memoir writing technique, or we get definitely into the logistics around publishing and book launches and all of that. But I think it first starts off with this open heart space of like, tell me your story.
Yeah.
What happened? How did you feel about it then? And let's try to find that thread about how you feel about it
Mhm.
now.
Yeah.
It's all allowed. It's all okay.
Mhm.
We have time to tweak. We have time to redraft, but it all starts at the very first question of, I can't remember who says it. Is it Maya Angelou who's like, tell me where it hurts? And like, how often does anybody ever ask you that?
Right. And yet it's one of the most important questions that you can
Mhm,
ask someone. And I love that that is the place where you start. Tell me where
mhm,
it hurts because we all have a hurt and
mhm.
we are not our hurts, which is something that you also
Yes.
say a lot that we are the resilience
Mhm,
inside us that allows us to hold space for our hurts and also to live anyway and
yeah.
to not allow those things to define us. And, I love your TED talk where you say change is proof of life.
Mhm.
And I wonder, is that something you say to your clients? Do you have them watch that or have them think about how change is proof of life in their own story or in their own experience?
Mm. I don't know if I like reference that per se, but I think it kind of comes through in just my approach and everything because
Mhm.
it's really just foundational to how I think and how I live and how I work, right? And when, I'm not into toxic positivity.
Yes.
Deserts to Mountaintops is the theme of the anthologies where I'm the lead author.
Mhm.
So, okay, we talk a lot about though that mountaintop looks different to everybody. And it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be all like tidy, pretty, tied up with a
Yes.
bow. Your mountaintop could be, I have one author who's contributing to the pilgrimage of motherhood, and she's writing about her journey with her daughter who's 30, who's mentally ill.
Mhm.
And it's not going to get better.
Yeah.
And one would say, well, where's the hope in that story? Where's the mountaintop in that story? She and I have had that conversation. And I'm
Mhm.
to me, the mountaintop is you're here writing about it.
Yeah.
You're brave enough to take us through this journey that has just been heart achingly beautiful and just filled with sorrow. And you're letting us into your world, and you have the courage to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is a mountaintop,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So, I mean, back to the change is your proof of life. I mean, I think that that's kind of like just the theme and the approach that we take to everything that we do at Soul Speak Press. Like these changes, I use the word change instead of kidnapping because it works better in a TED Talk. But,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you said, 2012, like it took you on this wild ride that you would never want to go on again. But also look where you're at now and what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing and what you've learned. And to me, that's the point. Like it's very simple, it's very cliche. But to me, that's the whole point of life. It's
Yeah,
just learn these lessons.
it is. And we all get a chance to either learn them or not. And if we choose not to, we will repeat them. That
Yes,
is
yes,
definitely for
yes,
sure. And I have certainly had my fair share of
yes.
those things happen. But yeah, I think being able to accept that change is reality and
Mhm.
to understand that different does not need to be spectacular
Mm,
is so important because readers will call BS if you do that.
yeah.
I mean, life is never wrapped up in a bow.
Nope.
And I have certainly read some memoirs by best-selling authors where I'm like, I don't know. I
Mhm.
kind of experienced some of these things. I know there's a little more nuance there.
Right, right, right.
And I think making it real for people
Mhm.
is important. And by the time this comes out, I will have published an essay in HuffPost on emotional flashbacks. It's
Mm,
going to be coming out in a couple of weeks because for those of you who are listening, we're recording this in August. And, I'm a person who has done a lot of healing.
mhm,
I also have a degree in clinical mental health counseling.
mhm,
I have worked with trauma survivors for many years.
mhm,
And yet, the reality of being a person who has complex PTSD is
mhm.
that sometimes my nervous system goes wonky and
Yep.
it does things that can be crippling at times.
Yes.
And it does not mean that I am broken, but it is also the reality. And I wrote this essay and I shared this because so many people go through this and they
Mhm.
don't understand what it is and they feel like there's something terribly wrong with them, but the
Yeah.
reality is they've just been through something
Yes.
and they're experiencing an echo of that experience.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, I think in our culture and our society, we don't leave time or space or opportunity to go through something.
Yeah, we don't.
We're deny, deny, deny. You don't have Lyme disease. You don't have Lyme disease. Like that's, you don't need these. It's just like always, I do. I feel like it's so prevalent. And I hear these stories all the time. And I think that that's why the work that I do resonates with the woman that it's meant to resonate with,
Mhm.
because finally, there's a place for them to go
Yeah.
where they can either I think generally we work with the woman who has gone through it and healed to a certain point where she's ready to start writing about it and talking about
Mhm.
it. But every once in a while we get someone who they haven't started that journey. And so
Yeah.
we're privileged and honored to get to initiate that with them and
Mhm.
to walk with them as they go through that. And it's hard,
Yeah.
but we
Absolutely.
we hold that space for them.
And that is such a gift because not everyone begins their healing journey in a therapy session. Some people
It's a
aren't
very good
privileged
point.
to do that because they don't have access,
Yep.
either because of funds or because of other things. And so,
Mhm.
wherever we begin is a gem for that
Yes.
person and for us to be able to be part of that experience.
Yes, absolutely. It's just important that we begin.
Exactly. And you are holding space for a bunch of authors who
Mhm.
are writing about motherhood.
Mhm.
You're writing an essay about motherhood. And
Yep.
this is going to air in December, which means the
Oh, awesome.
publication of your new anthology is going to be
Mhm.
just a few weeks away.
Yes. Yes.
So tell us about this upcoming anthology.
Yeah.
And you're writing an essay for it. What would you like us to know?
So this one is Deserts to Mountaintops, Volume 3. So it's our third, and it's called The Pilgrimage of Motherhood. And
Mhm.
I have had that title in my heart since my kids were babies. So I've held on to that for like 7, 8 years. I remember exactly where I was when that title came to me. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I'm so happy it gets to title this volume. And we have 22 women contributing, and the stories are as varied and diverse as the women themselves. Really harrowing journeys. Many of them have been on. In my particular, I'm still writing the essay. So I'm not sure how it's all going to evolve, but really it's about I got pregnant with my son about a week after the rescue. So, we always joke that my book is called Impossible Odds, but that was the impossible
Yeah.
odds. Like how how the hell did that happen? But here we are. And really what that process, like the processing of that, because that was re-traumatizing, right? I went from
Yeah.
one hostage situation to what felt like another hostage situation. Like I didn't know
Mhm.
what was happening to my body,
Yeah.
and just completely unexpected. And really my evolution as a mother
Mhm.
through this journey, and how he saved me. I think a
Mm.
second time I could have seen my healing journey having gone down maybe a rougher road had I not
Mhm.
had to show up for him
Yeah.
in those early days of trauma recovery and healing. Also, we had talked a little bit before we started recording about it happened so close to my kidnapping trauma that I wasn't ever sure, like, was my anxiety linked to PTSD from the kidnapping, or was it just motherhood? And so
Mhm.
trying to extrapolate which was which was really interesting, and something that I've just poured. I just have, I probably have 20 journals that I'll go back through, but I'm always excited about the anthologies that we put out, but this one feels like it feels like an accomplishment, because what is a pilgrimage? It's a sacred spiritual journey, and I feel
Mhm.
somehow that to me, it's that I've come full circle. If we want to look at the hero's journey, this feels
Yeah.
like I've completed that cycle, and for this facet of my life and my story to a certain degree. Anyway, that's how I like to think of it. So, yes, the book comes out January 25th, 2025, and yeah, we're really excited about it.
Wonderful. And are you doing pre-orders?
We don't. We like just load them all up on launch day. But we are taking, if anybody wants to help with like a book launch, to do like advanced reader reviews,
Mhm.
we would love some help. So feel free to reach out.
Well, speaking of such things, I'm going to ask you again at the end, is there about all of the ways that people can connect with you, but is there one way you would like people who would like to be advanced readers to connect with you?
Sure. They could email us at hello@soulspeakpress.com, and we will get them all set up.
Beautiful. So you're a writer, you're a writing coach, you work with so many different women. What is one of the best pieces of writing advice that you either share with others or that someone shared with you?
First, get it out, then get it right.
I love that.
Yeah. I think so many of my writers, my authors, they get so stuck in perfection.
Mhm.
And a lot of the writers that come to us are inexperienced. They have a story to share, but they've never really written. And so
Yeah.
we're taking baby steps. And that's again why we go back to the drawing board and just
Mhm.
tell me your story. Tell me what happened. Tell me where it hurts. And we'll help you get it down on paper. But first, we got to get it out.
Yeah. And that is true for anyone, whether you are writing about something really difficult or something that maybe is more informational. Just get it out, then
Yep.
get it right. So that's
Yep.
beautiful. So, as you hold space for all of these people and also for your healing, because as we both know, healing is an ongoing journey, we're always unpeeling another layer of the onion. What's one way that you nurture your resilience?
Well, I would say a lot of time alone. Like I am an outgoing introvert. I've landed on that, I think. And it is imperative for me, for my mental health, my emotional, spiritual health, my creativity. It's hard to carve that out when I have two little kids and clients and a husband who works from home. But that's why like that sacred start is really important for me.
Mm-hmm.
First thing in the morning when everybody else is still asleep, their energy is not like trying to overtake my
Mm-hmm.
energy, you know, it's
Yes.
just that's very sacred time for me. So that, and of course, you know, nature.
Mm-hmm.
Nature heals, nature absorbs, nature supports always. And so those are crucial for my healing.
And the same for me. And you have a connection to Charlottesville, Virginia, which is
Mhm.
where I live. And something that is not too far from Charlottesville, Virginia is the Porches, which is a writing retreat out in the middle of nowhere
Mm,
in Nelson County. And
yes.
sometimes I will go to the Porches so that I can just commune with nature, because even if you can
Yeah.
do it for 1 day or 2 days, just
Yes.
having that time of solitude is so important, I think, especially as women.
Yes. I mean, what a gift to have
Yeah.
that so close by. Like just, oh, yes, yes. We're starting to do writing retreats. We're having our first one for our anthology authors in April, and we're going to Asheville, and I'm super
Oh,
excited about it
nice.
because like just 10 of us getting together, taking time to write and to share and to heal, like move to that next
Hmm.
level. It's going to be pretty special. So
I love that. And I love Asheville. The
I
energy there
know.
is just so great. I
I know.
taught in Boone, what was it? Appalachian University in Boone,
Yeah.
North Carolina, which is pretty close to Asheville. I taught there
Yeah.
in, gosh, what was it? 2006. And I
Wow.
spent a month and a half in the mountains, and it was just a gorgeous setting. And there is just a special energy there.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, that energy is, like, what draws it out, right?
Yes.
You know? It's just there's nothing like it. So, yeah, I'm super excited.
Well, if people want to buy your anthology, check out all of the things you're doing, and to learn more about Soul Speak Press, what are the best ways for people to connect with you?
Thank you. Well, I'm on Instagram. That's pretty much my main social media platform. So Jessica C. Buchanan or Soul Speak Press, you can connect with us there. I'm active on both handles. You can check us out at soulspeakpress.com. We're currently getting ready to rebrand. So we'll have a brand new website by the time this comes out. So I'm excited about that. And then you could just email me, info@jessbuchanan.com, or my team at hello@soulspeakpress.com. We would love to, yeah, just hear your story.
Wonderful. And all of that will be in the show notes if you missed it. So fear not. You can connect with Jessica any way you would like. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It has been a pleasure to speak with you, and I've just absolutely loved our conversation.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I have loved it too. What great questions. I'm so appreciative.
That's it for today's episode. If you'd like to learn more about Jessica or buy a copy of Deserts to Mountaintops Volume 3 or any of her other books, please see the show notes for this episode. If you're learning from or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's a free and easy way to support the podcast. You can also get the latest episodes delivered to your inbox by signing up for my Writing Your Resilience newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of A Trauma Survivor's Guide to Writing the Tough Stuff. You can also follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, where you can leave a 5-star review. If you have questions for me, comments about the podcast, or questions or topics you'd like me to consider for the Writing Your Resilience podcast, please leave a comment on YouTube. I read them all, and I'd love to hear from you.